Yes, welcome everyone. Today we are going to have a discussion on fallacies. We have been looking at issues to do with critical reasoning and techniques of argumentation. And therefore, now we need to have the ability, or the cognitive ability to detect errors in people's reasoning. And that is what we are terming as fallacies. So just a recap. We can basically start by looking at or reminding ourselves of what arguments are, and then we can go into details of looking at the different uh, fallacies that can be detected in reasoning and how to avoid them. So I will basically be discussing what each fallacy means, at least an example of each fallacy, and what you can do to make sure that you avoid the fallacy, or how you can actually handle an argument in which you have detected a fallacy. So arguments occur when someone puts across statements um, which can either be correct or false. It can also either be true or false. So those statements are of two types. One are the premises and then the conclusion. The premises is the preposition that one puts across, and that preposition has truth value. It can be true or it can be false. And then the conclusion is basically like what is the implication? It is the conclusive implication of what the statement has just of the statement that has just been said. Okay, so for example, if someone says John is sick, that statement is either true or false. Okay, so it is a premise, and the conclusion to that is that John will not be able to go to school. So that kind of statement is what we call an argument. So arguments are basically very good. I mean, they're productive. They help us to make decisions. We are confronted with situations where you don't know the course of action. So you confront the situation or the problem for debate or for arguments. So people will give different opinions or different arguments, and then you choose the appropriate course of action for that you will take. Okay, so arguments help you to make sure that you solve problems after listening to people's arguments, and also it encourages critical thinking. If you are engaged in arguments, you are able to evaluate situations and also be able to reach to a particular conclusion. So it allows you to think critical about situations and also evaluate your own thinking about particular situations. So arguments are actually very, 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 very productive. Okay, so now we move forward to the next point, which is basically what fallacies are. Fallacies are errors in reasoning. This is what you can say is someone is giving you reasons that they want you to believe in, but those reasons are actually defective. They're not appropriate. Basically, what you have to remember is that in arguments, you put forward a particular position. So, for example, you say, "I will not be able to teach today." Okay, that's the statement, and the reason as to why you will not be able to teach today is because you are sick. So you are actually giving a reason for you not being able to teach. But if you don't provide a good reason, what we basically refer as evidence, and I will use this word often during this presentation, that for any conclusion that you reach at, there should be evidence. So if there is a defect in evidence that you're presenting, if there is defect in the structure of your reasoning, if there is anything that does not rhyme well with what particular arguments should be, then we are saying that you are engaged in fallacies, and therefore your reasoning is fallacious. So why do we need to understand these fallacies? It is very important because every day we listen to news, we see social media posts, and all the things are in a form of arguments, even TV adverts, radio adverts, whatever it is. People are actually putting arguments across, and they want you to take action. So what action are you going to take? That action is going to be based on what? Is it basically logic that you're going to base on to take action? Or is it because you are being deceived in a way? Or because they have used adverts which portray things that are not actually realistic. So it helps us to critically look at situations around us, and also it helps us to be good people in argumentation, so that we will realize that in your professional life you will be engaged in arguments, constructive arguments. It is very important to know that arguments are not necessarily negative. Arguments are actually positive in a way, like what I've just started with. So you'll be engaged in arguments. For example, you'll be compelling a government officer to increase funding for maternal health, for example, or to encourage girl child to go to school, all those things. For you to win such favor, whatever it is, you need to make sure that you put across compelling reasons and logical ones. And therefore, if you're good at that, then it means that you can also be able to fulfill your career goals. So argumentation skills are very, very important in your career life, and also make sure that you influence opinion and also change opinion. So it is actually very, very good. But the other thing is, if perhaps you are in a meeting and you're discussing issues, sometimes groups can reason in a way that may not provide us logical conclusions or logical decision. Illogical decision may not come up from certain groups, or let us say a meeting, for example, or consultation. So if you have the skills in detecting fallacious reasoning, then it means that there are high chances that you can detect the reasoning that is actually effective, and everyone will be like, wow, you're smart, you understand what you're actually talking about. So understanding these fallacies is very, very key in making sure that you actually look smart. So there are very many fallacies that you're going to look at. So I'm starting with the one called the appeal to nature. The appeal to nature is when someone provides an opinion about a particular product, and they are saying this product works very good because it is actually natural, but not things that are actually natural are good. We actually have poisonous plants, so you can't say because this is a natural plant it is actually very good. It is not necessarily the case. You need to provide evidence that actually this thing is natural, and the evidence for it working better than the other is this. So this is the kind of debate that we have with genetically modified organisms or even foods. Many people are saying that genetically modified foods are not good for human consumption because they are not natural. They are synthetic in a way. So that is their reasoning. But the reasoning that should actually come out in this is that maybe a scientific study has been carried out, and it has found out that genetically modified foods are associated with development of certain cancers, and there is evidence to use. So the evidence should be the one that comes from scientific studies, but not that actually GMOs are not natural. It's the same argument that usually people put across, that people who are homosexuals, for example, should not be accepted in communities, and the reason being that it is unnatural to be engaged in same-sex um, marriages. So those are issues. Then there's what we call black and white thinking. This is the belief that there are only two alternatives, and you actually, in a kind, create a crisis, a dilemma, that there are only two alternatives to solve a particular situation. No, the thing is, there are always alternatives, and therefore you should not narrow your thinking to only two alternatives. So black and white thinking is a fallacy that portrays a certain situation to be solved by only two alternatives, yet in reality there would be more than two alternatives. The homonyms fallacy is one where instead of attacking the argument, the person is actually attacking the person who's putting the argument across. Instead of arguing or providing evidence for or against any argument that is being presented, someone just instead may abuse, may talk about your character, your behaviors, or even your actions. So there are variations of this the homonym theory, fallacy. There is one called the homonym tokokwi. This is a U2 fallacy. This is talks about the fact that if someone puts out an argument, for example, someone says smoking is not good, okay, and then the response to that is that, but you are a smoker, so you're looking at me as a smoker, but you're not actually tackling the fact that actually smoking is not good, or smoking is harmful to your life, or things like that. So it looks at your actions. This could be actions that are inconsistent with the claim that you're making. It's not always nice to engage in arguments where you are attacking the person instead of attacking the argument. Abusing the person, still another fallacy at the hominem. Abusive, it's a variation. And then abusing someone's, or focusing on someone's religion, political affiliation, or ethnic background. This is also a fallacy. If I say there is this particular trait that is very common with a particular religion, and there is evidence to that, and then you say you're saying that because you're Muslim, or you're saying that because you're Christian, or you're saying that because you're in the opposition, or you're saying that because you're the ruling party, or you're saying that because you belong to this ethnic group or the other. So instead of attacking what I've just said, you focus on where I come from, the political party that I belong to, or even my religious status. Genetic fallacy is one which actually looks at the origin of a particular argument as evidence for whether it is actually true or not. In the markets, you go and argue about whether a given product is genuine or not. And then the seller will most likely tell you that this is not a very genuine product because it is made from China. But you can still have good products from China. So this is a genetic fallacy that looks at the origin as evidence for why a statement is actually correct or false. Or someone will say, I saw this in the movie and I think this works. Then someone says, because it was a movie, it is not a fact. So, but strange things in the movies can be facts. Slippery slope. This is when it is a fallacy that is actually portraying a kind of consequences that will happen if an action is taken. So one consequence leading to the other and the other and the other. So for example, people who say that there should be sex education in secondary school, such that people, young adults or people, pupils of school-going age, can actually be able to make informed decisions if they are to engage in sexual activity. Some people will say that if you tell them how to engage in sexual activity, then you actually start engaging in it, and then you get STIs or HIV, get pregnant, then drop out of school. That is what you call slippery slope. Like You're saying A will lead to B, and B will lead to C, and B and C will lead to. So it's something like that. Some people argue from ignorance. It is a fallacy, like because there is no evidence that something exists. So use that as evidence that that thing actually exists. Okay, so it is also called what burden of proof. Someone will say God exists because the Bible says God exists. Saying so is not evidence that that a God actually exists. So that is a kind of fallacy. Cherry picking is using data that actually support a particular narrative that you have. It can be called confirmation bias. So like you see the cherries, we have the green ones, and then you have the ones that are actually ripe. So for you, you focus on picking information that is actually drive your narrative. Yet sometimes you can have conflicting data, and if you have conflicting data, it is very important to pick to look at both sides of the conflicting data. So this is very, very, very important in argumentation. You don't need to only pick particular data that support what you are saying. So if you do that, you're doing what we call cherry picking. Spotlight. Spotlight is a fallacy that is actually is when someone says that, you see, South Sudan is very, 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 very dangerous place to live in. And they're making that argument because of what they see in the media, what they see on TV, on newspapers, on social media. Yet, actually, when they come to South Sudan, they will actually be surprised that they're actually very, there's life going on in South Sudan. People are living. There's some development going on. There are some nice places to visit. There are nice people to there. So spotlight is when you have a particular population being portrayed in a particular way because of what people see in the media. So the media usually has a tendency to focus on certain dramatic events and leave out the positive ones sometimes. Appeal to emotion. Instead of actually providing evidence for why a particular situation should be as you want, you instead appeal to emotion. You want people's emotions to be drawn towards you, either they feel sympathetic towards you. So you go for a job interview, for example. You say the interviewer will ask you, why should I give you the job? And you say, see, my mother is very sick. She has been sick for the last 10 months, and she takes $10, whatever amount of money a month for her treatment. And therefore, I need this job because my mom is going to die if I don't get this job. So the interviewer, you're appealing to the person's emotions to give you the job instead of saying, I'm very competent, I have experience in this, this is my education background, I've been able to develop A, B, C, D. So that's a fallacy. Don't appeal to the emotions. But sometimes it's also very important to inject in a bit of emotions in your argument. So you just need to weigh when to use that and when not to use it. When special pleading is a fallacy, that when someone asks or wants a particular exemption without giving any particular reason for it. So, for example, you have a rule in your office or your workplace that you should not entertain visitors during working hours, and then perhaps your boss has a daughter, and then the daughter comes during working hours. So your boss accepts the daughter to come because she is her or his daughter. So she is not providing particular reason as to why the daughter actually has to meet him or her during working hours, just because it is just her or his daughter. So there is no particular reason for why that this, the daughter should actually visit and meet the boss, but just because she's a daughter. And that is the reason that is being given. She's my daughter, and therefore she can visit me anytime. So special pleading is like someone has an exemption criteria they're applying, but for no particular reason as to why they're actually entitled for that exemption. Relativist fallacy. Okay, what is good? It's good for me, and maybe it's not good for you, something like that, or saying, for me, I think the answer is A, for you, you think the answer is B, and that's okay. No, there should be truth. It cannot be both sides. So if for me, I'm saying a dog is a reptile, then you either say yes or no, but not me saying a dog is a reptile and that is a yes, and then for you say it is a no, and then you say good. It's a no for you, but for me it is a yes. There's nothing relative. It is either a reptile or not. Strawman fallacy is when now someone puts an argument across, and then for you, you decide to draw another argument, which is not perhaps exactly like the original argument, and then you attack the argument that you have created. We are talking about a different matter altogether, and then you create another matter, and then attack the matter that you have actually created. That is what we call a strawman's fallacy. So, for example, I'm telling you that you need to visit the gym such that you remain fit and make sure that you don't you reduce the risk of getting cardiovascular conditions. That is my argument. And then for you, you create another argument that people actually who visit the gym are promiscuous, meaning that you're creating another debate, which is promiscuity and its association with people who go to the gym. So you say, then you now say promiscuity is not good because of ABCD. But the argument is that you need to be fully fit by visiting the gym such that you reduce the risks of getting cardiovascular conditions. Peer pressure. As a group, you have a position that you're taking, and you're saying that if you don't agree with us, then you get out of our group. So rejection from the group is the reason for why you are actually saying the person should support you. That is not a good evidence enough. It's not actually evidence. It's a threat. It's a threat of rejection. So this is what you call actually bandwagon. Misleading vividness. Sometimes what you see in the news is portrayal of particular events. They could actually be isolated events that are portrayed in dramatic manner. And therefore, when someone looks at it, that person may reflect it on the whole population. So, for example, if you have a 13-year-old girl who became an orphan at the age of 9 and is taking care of her siblings who are 4 in number, that is not a pretty good situation, meaning that a 13-year-old is actually the head of a family and she's taking care of her and she has to go to school and things like that. So that is actually not a very good situation. But that could be one in a million. So situations like that can be dramatic, but and they can be misleading sometimes if you imply that the whole population is just like that. Absolutism. This is when someone has no exemptions. You look at situations where there are no exemptions. No, there are situations which are very, very complex, and there are exemptions to the rule, for example. So you need to understand that you can be faced with complex issues, okay, and these issues can have exemptions. So if you're evaluating issues, you don't necessarily need to rush to make conclusions just because you have particular rules, and therefore, because the rules are rules, you think that there could be no particular exemptions for particular individuals. So don't use that as in your arguments. It's important to evaluate each matter that comes and see whether exemptions can apply or they may not actually apply. Circular reasoning, you can also call it begging the question. This is similar to what we earlier on talked about, that someone will say that God exists because the Bible says so. That is not necessarily the evidence that you actually want for why you're saying God exists. So that is what we call circular reasoning. Middle ground. Middle ground is when someone chooses a position that is actually neutral. So, for example, if you have two positions, position A and position B, people are debating about a particular particular issue, a particular matter. So they're taking sides. You're either on side A or side B. So the person who is taking the middle ground will say, since there are people on side A and B, for me I'll be in the middle because the middle is actually the right one because it is in the middle. So there's nothing like that. So for example, someone say that the fish can fly, and then someone will say, no, the fish don't fly. And then for you, because you want to be in the middle, you're going to say some fish can fly. No, that's not good enough. Equivocation is confusing people using words that have that have more than one meaning, and then you play around with the meaning of that word. So, for example, the word vehicle. Of course, we know a vehicle can be used for transport. So, a vehicle is transport. And then someone would tell you that I don't want you to use me as a vehicle for your political ambition. So this actually means that these are two statements that may not necessarily be related. You're using the word vehicle to confuse people around. So what is very important if you engage in an argument where the key words you're using have multiple meanings, and it is therefore very important that you actually define the meaning of the key terms that you're using, just not to confuse people. Hasty generalization is when you make a conclusion based on sample that is not actually a very good sample. It is not representative of the general group. And therefore, you tend towards what you call stereotyping. You've met a few people and then you conclude that people from this tribe are actually not good people. You're using the few people that you have met to make a generalization about people, about a whole group of people. The chances are that what you're saying is not right because you're basing it on the few people that you have actually met. Yet there are millions of people of the same, perhaps same tribe, but they don't necessarily behave like that. So that is hasty generalization. Ignoring a common cause. Okay? So sometimes people only focus on one particular cause of a particular event. Yet there could be another factor that would have caused the event to happen. So, for example, you say, she's always with him. I'm sure he's the one who spoiled her. This is to disregard that she could be having another online friend who you cannot see physically, but she is always in constant interaction with that person. So what if that online friend is the one who is actually influencing the behavior of this person? So don't always ignore another common cause. Composition, fallacy of composition. This is to say that if you have a whole, when you separate it into its parts, the parts are equal to the whole. No. It's, for example, saying that water is a liquid, it's therefore wet, and water is made up of hydrogen and oxygen, and therefore you're saying naturally hydrogen and oxygen are always liquids. So because hydrogen and water, when they combine, they form water, does not mean that when you split water, you get hydrogen and oxygen, which are in exact physical form like water. So that is the fallacy of composition. The fallacy of division is to say that if you have the parts are the same in qualities like the whole. So for example, we use the water and the hydrogen. So meaning that if the properties of water separate and hydrogen separate are equal to the properties of water that you usually know. No, that's not the case. So for example, someone says South Sudanese are tall. John is a South Sudanese, and therefore John is actually tall. No, John could actually be short because they're also short South Sudanese. Lottery fallacy. You hear all these companies announcing competitions for winning particular prizes. And then someone will say, no, she cannot be the one who wins. But because the management of the company decided that she has to be the one who will win, so you're saying that there is no chance, because lottery is about chances. There is no chance that actually that person would have won. But mathematically, there is a chance that she would have won. So you're saying that she won not by chance, but because she was selected. This is what you're implying. Guilty by association. This can be called a bad company fallacy. Okay, the company that you keep, the company that you keep fallacy. Those are the other names. Now the issue is here that I should not believe you because you are always with him. You get, because I'm always with him, you cannot believe my argument. Or by saying that you should not believe it because so and so said it, because it's so and so who said it, you should not believe it. So those are the things. Gambler's fallacy. And you see, Arsenal did not win the last match. I'm very sure it will win this time. Okay, so you are predicting the occurrence of a particular outcome based on another event that is actually not related to the event that is going to happen next. These are the previous match is independent from the match that Arsenal is going to play. So the circumstances are not going to be the same. It's going to be it may be a different stadium, it may be a different lineup, it may be different levels of passion towards the match, or the match that may actually mean something different to the players and things like that. So these are all factors that can determine whether the team will win or not. It's not that they won, they lost the last match and the next match they should win. Not necessarily. False dilemma is what we talked about earlier on, saying that there are only two alternatives, yet there are actually more alternatives to expression. Appeal to tradition, saying, because my laptop is very old, I've been with it for the last 10 years, it is the best. There is no laptop that is actually better than this. That is appeal to tradition, saying that all the things are better. Appeal to novelty. This is to say that new is better. My iPhone 14 is better than iPhone 13, just because it is new. You just need to provide evidence for why you think this new iPhone is better than the other in terms of functionality, appearance, and things like that, durability, but not because it is new. So it does not necessarily mean that new things are always better than the old ones. Appeal to flattery. This is to say, instead of providing reasons or evidence for a particular conclusion, you are instead appealing to someone by either saying, "Oh, boss, today you are very, very smart. Oh, by the way, can we have a discussion on my salary issues?" Okay, so you're flattering and you're making a request. Instead of saying, perhaps, this month I've been able to generate this number of sales and I think I deserve a pay rise. Appeal to fear. Scare tactics. Appeal to force. Okay, this is now saying you should do this or you will face the consequences. That does not usually work. You should make people to do particular things after providing them convincing reason, rational reasons to believe, or prudent reasons or plausible reasons for why a particular action should be taken. Appeal to common practice. This is how we have always been doing it and we don't want to change it. This is how Dr. So does it. We don't want to change it. What if there is new evidence that what you're actually doing is not good or is harmful to the patient or to the customer? So you should be able to identify that. This is how we have always been doing it. No. Appeal to authority. Because someone is an expert in a particular field, you should always not ask them questions. Okay? Not always ask them questions. No. No. This is also related to appeal to expert. Because someone is an expert in a particular field, or someone has an authority in a particular field, and they should not be questioned, and everything they say is always right. No. So another one, which is also related to appeal to fear, is if you don't believe it, you face negative consequences. It's just basically like appealing to someone's fear. Then we have appeal to pity. This is when saying that I'm not able to pay tuition because I have uh, 3 wives that I have to take care of. So you want me to feel pity for you because you have 3 wives? That is a fallacy. And then we have appeal to ridicule. This is like the ad hominem that we actually looked at. So this is not responding to issues, but you're instead describing the character. You're very crazy. This is very laughable. So you're such a fool. Things like that. And then appeal to spite. This is to say, I think Jen should be voted as the employee of the year. And then someone says, oh, you don't remember that Jen is the one who objected to your promotion? So because I have a hurting issue with Jen, you're using that as evidence why Jen should not be the employee of the year? No. You should bring evidence that Jen was not able to perform to the expectation ABCD, and therefore should not be the employee of the year. But if you appeal to spite, that is a fallacy. Okay, and then the last fallacy is appeal to consequences. If you don't believe in what I'm saying, then you may most likely face negative consequences. That is not necessarily good. So thank you for listening to this presentation. I hope you are in position to pick out the things that perhaps you have been practicing in your arguments at the workplace on social media. If you look at social media posts, you should be able to identify that this is not a right argument, and this is how to handle it, and things like that. So thank you very much for listening, and have a good time. Thank you.